right, everybody. Welcome back to the Impact Space podcast. We're so excited to have a special guest with us today. Kelyn, how are you, my man?
I'm doing well as you break up my game day prep, but it's okay. At least we could
Easy.
talk footy, you know?
For those of you who don't know, Kelyn Rowe, a longtime professional, a local guy as well. Mumbi and I grew up in the Seattle, Washington area, and Kellen's from the 253, and we're actually also from the 253. I have a 253 cell phone, but we grew up. I don't know if you know this, Kelyn, but our parents currently live in Saltwater State Park, right around there,
Hmm.
and that's where we grew up. So we're all three of us are coming from a similar area. So it's
Down
a pleasure to
south.
have you on. Yeah, down south, exactly. So, and of course, we're here. Mumbi's here. How are you, Mumbi?
I'm good, man. Excited to speak with you guys today.
Awesome. Well, we have an awesome show for you guys today. Um, Episode 2 was all about how players can improve, because we obviously get that question a lot. Coach, how can I improve? And today we have probably the perfect guest to talk about mindset and also just how to deal with not getting what you want, or rejection in in anywhere, because all of us, no matter what level you played at, and the three of us played at a good level, especially Kelyn, um, things aren't always rosy, and you're gonna you're gonna have hard conversations with coaches or hard selections, and things that you have to bounce back from. So, super excited again to have Kelyn on, and for all of you listening, young players, parents, coaches, hopefully you enjoy this one. So, it's an honor. Kelyn, tell the people a little bit about yourself, man. I could say a bunch of things, but they want to hear from you. So,
Wow. Let's see. Really funny guy. Great looking. Um, yeah, no, I
single,
grew up
single,
grew
by
up
the way, right now,
yeah,
right?
grew up in Federal Way.
Right.
You can leave that question to yourself. Um, I don't need your parents coming after me. Uh, no, I grew up in Federal Way, went to UCLA for about a year and a half before going pro. And that first team that I got drafted to was New England, which was a great thing for, we talk about like the mentality of things, as you brought up, going from the West Coast to somewhere I've never been before in Boston, never even thought about it. I got on the plane in January in LA, jeans and a t-shirt. Got off the plane in Boston in January in jeans and a t-shirt and had to like put on every piece of sweater that I had because it was like 10 degrees out. So like not, the almost ignorance of a young kid that got drafted out there at 20 years old, kind of not knowing and just being oblivious to what life was like on the other side of the country. So I played there for 8 years and had a small stint in the middle of the country at Kansas City and Salt Lake, and then found my way back home to Seattle. It's a 12-year career. Yeah.
And of course, I mean, you must get this question a lot. Everybody who's played as long as you did might get this question. But when you were, let's say, 10, 11, right? At that time, you were in Federal Way still, right? In club ball, yeah. When you were young, um, did you think that you were going to have a prolonged professional career and the experiences that you had? Like, is that something? When did that enter your mind? Like, hey, this is something that I can actually make a living at for a decent amount of time.
So it's you said 10, 11. So around 10, 11, my dad was a high school, still is a high school math teacher, and he kind of helped out with the soccer team. And so when I was 10, 11, I used to go play with the soccer guys and whatnot. And so when a few of those guys went to UW, that was my birthday present to go see them play. And so they played UCLA. UCLA crushed them like 3-0. And like these were my heroes at UW, right? They were the kids I grew up with. They were the ones who taught me how to celebrate. They taught me how to slide tackle. Like it was fun for me. And then they go out and get crushed by UCLA. And so on the car ride home, my dad was like, "How do you think about the game?" And I told him flat out, I was like, "I'm going to go to UCLA and then I'm going to go pro." Those guys were good. And he laughed at me and was like, "Well, you got to start working harder than you're doing now." Which I worked very hard back then, but he was just, in that fatherly sense of like, if you want that, it's going to be more work than you think. And then, come time when I had to pick a college, well, And guess which one I wanted to go to? UCLA, which I did. And then a year later, I was pro. So I had the idea of it, but I didn't know I was as good as I was until I went to UCLA. So I got to UCLA. It was media day, like second day in, right? You do your fitness tests, and then you go to media day. And I get there, and in my locker was the number 10 jersey. And I was like, well, they didn't ask me what number I wanted. I thought I'd just get some random number. We had 10 freshmen at that time. Everyone got like big, like large numbers that no one really talked about, and I got the number 10. And so I'm sitting there like, hey, is this a mistake? And they're like, no, we think you're gonna fit that pretty well. I was like, oh my god, okay. Going into the first game, score 2 goals. I'm like, oh, maybe I'm better than I think. I got a chance here. And then I really felt it when I was at the national team. So that same year, we finished up our college season, and I got invited to the under-20 national team camp right before their qualifying games to the World Cup. Had a really good camp. I got called back in for the World Cup, for the qualifying for the World Cup. Played extremely well, but in that camp, we played in front of all the MLS coaches. For 2 days straight, I had to turn my phone off. I got calls like, hey, do you want to come out in the draft? Hey, we'll draft you in the top 10. Hey, this is a freshman year of college. I didn't know I was that good. And then finally after that, and I said I was going to go back to college for another season because I wasn't there yet. Maturity, I wasn't there yet. Like my body wasn't there yet. I needed a little bit extra. I needed a senior to beat me up a bit. I needed the big boys to run through me a few times. I needed to learn that, and I did at UCLA, that I'm not as good as I think I am. I have work to do. I've got to get better in many facets of my life and my game. And then finally, after my sophomore year, I went pro.
Man, that's fascinating because you often hear, when you're talking to pros at whatever stage of their journey, you don't often hear that. Like, oh yeah, I realized I was actually pretty good. Like you had to almost like convince yourself. I find that interesting. But good stuff. I love that.
You're good in like Washington, right? You play youth stuff,
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, I'm kind of the guy on our team.
You got to test yourself. Yeah.
I had a guy like Bernie James. I remember playing a ball. I'm on the other side of Bernie, so he's on the sideline. I'm on the other side, and I play a diagonal to our guy's feet. I mean, picture perfect. Guy takes a touch, loses the ball. Bernie yells at me, Kelyn, I want to win. Stop passing the effing ball. I'm like looking around like, guys, did you hear that? And they were like, no, just go score. I'm like, yeah, okay. But that's a small town of Washington, right? Like I didn't think it was the big picture. And so when I got to college and played with the people that were older than me, that were different areas, they were the best they're the best player on their teams. And I was still showing up and being the guy. That's when, you have to see it from the outside.
No, I love that.
Kelyn, just real quick, as a youth player before you went to college, that switch and that conversation you had with your dad, like what was that like? What did that look like for you with, your dad's like, hey, you have a lot more work to do. So what did you do exactly to put yourself in that position to even play at the collegiate level? Like what did that look like?
So there's a lot of things that went into it. And I'll start when I was definitely younger. I did Corver coaching, if you remember what that is. So I was with TR Stoneback. My older sister and I were the first 2 in Pacific Northwest. So it's kind of like cool to start that. But I would train that. I'd go to my trainings in which I was actually playing up a year. So I was already still little, but I was 4'0" back then, playing against guys who were going into high school, starting to actually hit puberty. And so I had to find ways instead of, I made an analogy the other day to a friend of mine. Instead of running through the wall, I had to find a way. I had to find the little gap around the wall, so instead of having to run through people and just dribbling around people, now people were stronger, faster, probably smarter than I was half the time. And so I had to learn that piece of the game because I was playing against older kids. And then I was very lucky that my parents had time because after my practice at Steel Lake Park was 2 years older or 3 years older. And I would always go over and ask my dad, hey, can you go ask if I can train with them? I'm not done yet. Like, I want to play more. Like, can I go train with them? And thankfully, they did. They let me. And so, yeah, Jimmy McAllister was there, and he was the guy that was like, my nickname was Wee Man because I was so freaking tiny. And I would play with those guys, and I got better because of it.
So what I'm hearing then, part of it was just you were obsessed,
Oh
right?
yeah,
And you loved it. You almost had to maybe even be dragged off the field then.
yeah. And don't get me wrong, this is not like, and everyone always says I was obsessed with this. I was that. This wasn't every day. It can't be. It can't be. You're just gonna burn out, right? I didn't live, breathe, eat soccer. It was one of the reasons I went to when I went to Europe as a kid as well, and just to play games. It wasn't like I was going on trial or anything, but go play some games in Europe. These guys like lived and breathed soccer, and I was like, I want to go do something else. I want to go walk around the town. I want to go do other things. I want to see what this thing is like. Or I was playing football still. I was playing baseball still. I was doing everything, but soccer was the one I loved the most. But it wasn't like it was 24/7 soccer, 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 soccer. And actually, Moo and I talked about this. Was that I don't watch soccer that often, but I wanted to play. Like, every time I watched it, I was like, "This is boring. I want to go play it." I wanted to move. Yeah.
That's fascinating because, and I want to highlight that point because one, this kind of goes without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Everybody's journey is different,
Yeah.
right? So obviously your journey is different than, Lamar Nagel's, who I know you know really well, right? And or yeah, different than any number of guys who from this region that have gone and played. So it's different than my journey, it's different than Mubi's journey. Everybody's journey is different. The other thing that you said that I love, that I absolutely love, and that smashes a myth that's going out there, right? And this is aimed more so at, yeah, young players, but also coaches, right? Because there's that saying that people like to throw out there that, oh, the problem with youth players in America is they don't watch the game enough, right? And oh, they just don't watch it enough. They don't watch it enough. And then the translation is that is justification for sort of whatever things that clubs are doing at their youth at their training sessions during the week, because we got to fill in this gap that the players don't watch the game enough, right? And it's like, no, first of all, the game is more accessible to watch than it has ever been, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because literally you can watch from Monday to Sunday if you have maybe even one or two of the right streaming services. You can watch a game anywhere in the world,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then two, and going back to what you said, Kellen, and you put it so beautifully, young players want to play. They want to play, and whatever their entry into the game is in terms of whatever falls in terms of the pecking order, whether it's their favorite sport or whether it's just the third or something they just love to do with their friends, that matters, and that's an entry point into the game, and you have to meet the player where they're at. And you never know if it might be a Kelyn Rowe who ends up making a career out of it. But the point is, that should shape our understanding of the environments that we create. So, anyway, I just wanted to highlight that point, Kelyn. I think it's beautiful. It can't be said enough. Can you say more about sort of your, so yeah, you get to UCLA, you start having, of course, lots of attention, and you start realizing you're pretty good. Can you speak about then sort of the shift or the challenges that you had to face in terms of your mindset and how you approach things following this jump in level that you experienced?
So even going from club to college, there was a bit of a jump, right? There definitely is. Like I said, and then this was before. I mean, really, this may have been before any homegrown players were there. So everyone went to college first.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
no like academy system wasn't around. The Sounders Academy had come in, I think, in 2010 or 2011. So when I was already in college, and so it just wasn't around for us. We didn't think about it. And so before going pro, you always went to college, or that was kind of the way it went. And so I knew that there was going to be good players, and there were, bigger, faster, stronger. I mean, I went to school with Chandler Hoffman, who was the leading goal scorer in college at that time. I went to school with Andy Rose and played with him, and he's obviously now, assistant coach at the Sounders, but had a prolific career both in the MLS and overseas. I mean, Brian Rowe, a goalkeeper as well. So like we had really, really good players, and so I had to learn a lot of, one, respect, I wasn't just going to go out and dribble 10 people anymore. I couldn't start get the ball off my box and just kind of shoot my way forward. It just wasn't going to happen. Find a way to put my players in the best position. That way I would then benefit from it as well. And a guy who was really good at this, and I actually ended up playing pro with later on, was Lee Win, who would set you up. The pass that he gave you actually set him up. Not always to benefit, but it would always, the ball that he played you, if it was a little bit faster, he wanted you to take a touch because he then had to move around to get the next pass, or it's a little dink and he found a way to get around. Like he was just really good about setting himself up, thinking 3 moves ahead, so he could get the ball where he wanted it, which is, to be fair, most of the time it's where we wanted it, on his feet in a good spot. But there was a time, so not many players know this unless you played with me, but my sophomore year, so my final year in college, we were in the NCAA, and I was Pac-12 Player of the Year, playing really well. And the last 2 games of the season, I was kind of dealing with a little niggle on the hamstring, and so they kind of, I was off the bench. I was just limited minutes off the bench. The team played pretty well, and so all of NCAA, I didn't start a game. I'd come off because at the time, college rules, you could sub in once at half, before the half, and then I think the second half you can sub in whenever you want. And so there were times where I didn't even start the second half. But I'd come on 10 minutes into the game. But because the coach was like, you know what, this is our winning team, and we had this conversation after every single game. We had the conversation. I said, no, the winning team is when I'm on the field, because you have me on the field for 70 minutes. You just split it up between the halves. And he was set in his ways that every time we've won, we started with this team. And I said, okay. And so that was the first time I've never, in the biggest games, I wasn't the guy, and I was, I had to realize this. I was no matter what, I was going to play. However, I was not getting the recognition as a starter, and that hurt me a lot. But it also, and I give some credit to Jorge, but most credit to Andy Rose, is they put a chip on my shoulder and was like, well, prove him wrong. Next game, he has to start you if you play well, or if the team does well. And it didn't happen, but they kept telling me, Andy Rose was a big guy. He was like, just if you play well, they're going to start you, and I went away with I think in 5 games, it was 3 assists and 2 goals. One being in the semifinal, when fortunately we lost in PKs, but I was off the bench every single time. And then going into the pro career, I had thought that they just ruined my draft for me. They knew I was going. I told them I was going. They already gave away my scholarship at that time. So I was not coming back. And so it just kind of, in my mind, I was, resenting UCLA for my draft. And then I realized when I went 3rd in the draft, I was like, oh, maybe that probably, that was just in my brain. Yeah, I overthought that one.
Would you say then that moment is a moment that all players absolutely need growing up, Kelyn, is being told, hey, you are going to come off the bench, or hey, you're going to go play a different position, or whatever it might be that kind of unsettles you a little bit? Do you think that's crucial for a player to have to build themselves?
In a sense of a football player, absolutely. And to be honest with you, it happened to me my whole career. I was one of the first guys that they would take off because they could. One, I could handle it. I'm not going to stop working. I can handle it. My mentality is to go, right? It's like, screw it. I'm going to run. I don't care. And then the second piece is that, I was for all in all, I had a great career. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to put anything bad about that, but I was a role player most of the time. I was the guy that they put in. They didn't think they bought someone in my position for a lot of money, and then I'd beat them out in either 3 or 4 games into the season. And then I would continue to go. And sometimes, and there's a reason I had to change positions so many times, is because they kept buying players in that position to play. And so I'd always find myself coming off the bench rather than continuously playing. So I said, okay, let's redefine myself. Let's go to the midfield. Let's go to the number 6 spot now out of the attacking positions. Let's go to left back. Let's go to right back. And some of this was just because my coach, Jay Heaps, when I first started in New England, he was like, look, you're my guy. I want to put you on the field. but I can't put you on the field because I'm getting pressure to play this $2 million guy. I'm getting pressure to play this guy who has 10 assists. Like I can't continue. So you've got to change. And then I went into the national team. This is just going to be a long story, but I went into the national team and played left winger and played very well. I goal and assist in 3 games. We'll talk about this adversity later, but I got sent home. And then
This is at the Gold Cup, right?
This is at the Gold Cup. Yeah,
2017.
Got sent home after scoring a goal. The night after scoring a goal, or the morning after scoring a goal, I got sent home. And then I go to my coach and I go, look, I just proved that I am a left winger. That I am going to on the biggest stage that you could ever play in, I'm a left winger and perform very well. And he goes, I couldn't agree more with you, but I need you at left back this year. How do I, what do I say? Well, I'm either going to not start and play little minutes or redefine myself and play more. Okay.
Just to clarify for folks, and just you were at the national team, you played as a left winger, played well, and then when you got back to your home environment, you were like, hey, I want to play left wing, but then the coach said, no, we need you to play left back.
Yeah. Like if you want to play on the field, like I have a guy there who's making a lot of money and plays really well for us. I need you to redefine it and go somewhere else, in a position. But and then to go back to your question, would be it also taught me a lot outside of a football player into like life. There in life, you get it. And as I'm looking for like a new job and to actually get into the real world again, as I call it, the real world, it's adversity is every day. It is every day. You cannot always get what you want. And we, yes, as soccer players and as professionals, we get a lot of luxuries, but it is not all, roses and rainbows here. It is a lot of adversity every day. It is going through rejection and a breakup, family trauma. You've got, little things in life that come at you. You have to find a way to get through. And if you can do it on the field, you can usually do it in life. And if you can do it in life, you can normally do it on the field. And so it kind of you become more of a person than you do just a player.
That's a fantastic point. And what I wanted to add to that is just based on the climate sometimes of today's youth game, sometimes the attitude is, oh, that coach doesn't like me, let me switch teams, right? That club, it didn't work out, let me switch again, right? And now within even 12 months, you have kids switching 2 teams, trying to find the perfect place where nothing is wrong. When really sometimes, from what I'm hearing you say and this awesome testimony that you're giving, it's like sometimes you got to dig in, right? And that sometimes that's the best thing for you actually, right? That you dig in. Because maybe at one point, say you go back to Jay Heaps and you're like, nah, man, I don't want it. Like, that's not going to work for me. Well, then, okay, you're on the bench or you're out of contract in a couple months and they don't renew, right? And so people got to learn that sometimes that short-term hiccup or adversity is actually setting you up for longer-term success.
Yeah, no, and it does. And look, I didn't agree with, and people always tell me, what boss didn't you like? What manager did you not like? What manager did you like? Do you like him at all? And I go, well, not everyone loves their boss. And you don't, even if you do, you don't love your boss all the time. That's human nature. I don't love my family all the time. Sometimes they really get on my last nerve. I don't love my best friends half the time because they just get on my, there's sometimes you just want to fight them. But, you got to stick it out sometimes. And there are times as well at the youth level. I don't think this is great to do, but there are times that, that coach does not fit. That style does not fit. However, because as a professional, like I can say that because I know the style I need to play in, because I've done it for so long. As a youth player, you should be a sponge. I want to learn all the styles, but like you should be a sponge rather than kind of just giving up because it's not working for you. And to be fair, I think, like you said, it's usually the player that you just got to stick it out and dig it out because you might learn something about yourself, about your game, your team. Your coach might be better than you think because you actually hear it from a different perspective now. But there is something to say about grinding something out. And it's one of the best things that athletes can do is finding a way to just put your head down and work. And it should be something that it should be every day.
Yeah, no, I tied to that. The point about the youth player, let's be real. If we can talk, we can be really blunt here. So all three of us grew up in the same place and played in the same spaces growing up. One of the challenges is the mindset is that the often that the ends justify the means. So, for example, if you're winning or you're on a team that wins, regardless of whatever your individual experience is as a young player, means development, which is not exactly the case. Similarly, and of course, there's a balance, right? It's a spectrum. And you have to be, context is key. But just like you're on a team that's losing, maybe not all the time, because obviously if you're losing all the time, your team's probably playing in the wrong division or the wrong way. But let's say your team is winning some games but losing a lot. Oftentimes, parents will say, "Oh, see, it's just not working." And that may also not be true, right? Because what I'm hearing you say, and tying back to what we've said in the last couple episodes, Mumbi, that we've done, right? And I want to be very consistent here because this is what this podcast is about. It's about joy, yes, and it is about learning. And if you are getting those things, it might be a great environment. Even if, and then tying back to what you're saying, Kelyn, even if you as a player are not getting your way all of the time. But that finding that balance and sort of finding that quality can be a tough thing. What I'm getting from your journey, though, Kelyn, is that it seems like you had not just a good head on your shoulders, but it seems like you had good people around you and parents who at least helped you navigate that. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, they helped me navigate it for sure. And look, it was, and this is not everyone's cup of tea. I've got two sisters and my parents raised them very similarly, but I took it a little bit differently than they did. And other parents, parented their kids a little bit different. But even you talk about, if a team wins all the time, and my team, when in Federal Way, we were very good. State champs multiple times. Like, we were a very good team. And, as a kid, you don't play well, you don't work that hard, but you score a goal or you get an assist, you're like, I had a good game, right? Parents and coaches and things of that sort can be a very big advocate of this, but looking at the actual game itself, rewarding the goal. But I remember getting called, going to the car after the game, and I'm happy, I scored a goal, this is great. And both my parents are like, hey, how do you think you played? And that was always a trap question, by the way. It's a trap. It's an absolute trap. Never say good, never say bad. I could always do better, you learn it as you go. But I, at that time, I was like, well, I scored a goal. I played great. And my dad said, you walked half the game. My mom said, you lost the ball and never played defense. And I didn't think about that. All I thought was like, oh my gosh, I scored a goal and we won. But they brought me back to earth and thought, okay, think harder about your game here. You cannot just be a guy who just scores a goal every once in a while. If you want to be good, you want to go pro, you need to have this mentality of that, hey, I can always do better. And for me, that brought me to every single game. I'd look at myself and say, yes, I was my hardest critic. I'd obviously give myself some credit sometimes of, hey, I scored a goal. That was pretty cool. And I'd have some good times about that. But then I'd relish in the success and then kind of internally think, okay, what else could I do? I remember that, and a lot of times the best players will remember the actual misses than they will the actual makes, right? I remember missing that pass, and we probably would have won if I just put it around that defender rather than trying to go over the defender. Those things, like that's what kind of keeps me up at night rather than, I scored a goal every once in a while, and that's what people want to talk about. But I also remember that same game where I missed 6 passes, and unfortunately one of them I missed went for a goal. We won 2-1, but it could have been 2-0.
We can be our toughest critics, can't we? Especially
it makes us great. It causes trauma, but it makes us great. It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mumbi, did you have something?
No, just letting it simmer.
You're letting it simmer.
Letting it simmer. That does make me want to now transition to that 2017 Gold Cup.
Because,
no, for a couple reasons. No, because I do remember anytime there's been a local player that does well, it's awesome and it's cool to see, right? So to see
Yeah.
you do well, to see Jordan Morris do well, who I grew up playing against, like all these different players and guys that have made it there and have gone on to different teams, it's been awesome to watch. And so I do actually remember, because I was in college at that time when you got called up, 2017, and I was like, oh man, this is awesome. Kelyn is on that stage now. Let's see what he can do. And obviously, without knowing you, without knowing that background of what's going on at that time, you come into the U.S. national team, right? You're at the senior level. You have success on the field. And the coach at the time you said was Bruce Arena, correct? Mm-hmm. And Bruce tells you you're going home. What was that conversation like? And how did you even process that?
And before you answer that, let's set this up because I want to I want to set the stage here. Because I've heard this story in person, and I'm fortunate to say that. But also, I want to give Kelyn his shine here because like that 2017 Gold Cup, or people, because obviously people can have whatever opinion they want of the men's national team, and that's a whole nother podcast episode. And Kelyn and I have talked about these things in person as well. But there were some absolute ballers in that group, in that camp, right? So I want to make sure, Kelyn, when you tell the story, don't be shy, because I want to say, like, what wasn't Benny Fellhaber part of this group or no?
No, but it was like a Dax McCarty. It was Omar Gonzalez in his prime, Graham
Gotcha.
Zusti prime, Beasler
Yes.
prime.
Anyway,
Yeah, Dom Dwyer when he was scoring a ton of goals.
That was like the
Guys.
preliminary group, and then there was another group that was brought in. So anyway, I'll let you take it away.
With Gold Cup, and I'll give the expression of Gold Cup. So with Gold Cup, you play your group stage, and then you can have 6 transfers going out of the group stage into like the actual knockout rounds, right?
Right.
So you can have 6 players that can swap. A lot of times, guys who can't get released for the whole Gold Cup, or guys you want to see, you kind of just change it out. Injuries can happen, and so you trade them out. At the time, I didn't think I had anything to worry about. So we go there. It's my first call up to the full national team, so I'm pumped, obviously. I'm just going through a great season. It was actually an MVP season for me with my club team in the Revolution. And I'm playing 3-4 positions in a single game sometimes. And so I was always on the field. And so I was my fittest I'd probably been in a while and playing really well. And so I go in, and first game I start as a left winger against Ghana, which is obviously a very big game for the U.S. fans because they keep knocking us out of the World Cup. And so we play, and I get a chance on the top of the box, get the foul that we scored on. So we won't call that one an assist, but I set it up, right? So we get that. I don't get the credit for the assist, but I sure set it up. Kelyn Acosta actually is the one that kind of found the goal on that one, on the free kick. Going to the next game, we play Panama. It's in Nashville at 3:00, and it's 1,000,000 degrees out. No one's No one's running that much. It's a stalemate of a game. I find a way to flip it over the defender, play a cross in. Dom Dwyer scores it. We go up 1-0. Awesome. Then we ended up tying the game 1-1. I sit the next game, go to the following game. So 3 games now that I've played in, 3 starts. Get a goal before the half in Cleveland against Nicaragua. So get a goal. We're up 2-0 now. I'm celebrating. I'm pumped. We win 3-0. We obviously go to the next round. We're having dinner. I've got Alejandro Bedoya, Dax McCarty, and Zusi all like, here's a bottle of wine. Let's split it. Talk about things. Let's celebrate your goal. I got a game ball. Wake up the next morning, go to breakfast, and coach call. I'm an early riser, and so it's me, Michael Bradley, and Bruce Arena. Michael Bradley obviously is a very early riser as well. He's a bit of a dad, and I'm sitting there, and Bruce goes, "It's just not a complete game yet. We're going to send you home. We're bringing in Clint Dempsey and Darlington Nagbe, and Michael Bradley is going to come in as well." And I was like, I just had an assist and a goal. I had the most shots for a U.S. player on frame as well. I had most chances created. I was running all over the field. And he said, "Well, you're not going to play here anymore, and your team needs you. So we're going to send you home. You have a flight in 2 hours." what? Okay. And all I had to do was like, okay, well, I gotta go. There's gonna be a car waiting for me in 20 minutes, and so I went and put all my stuff in my bag, and I didn't. I saw the guys at Regen that were like regenning after the game that I had just played in, as I was walking out of the hotel, and I was like, hey guys, I'll see you later. Okay, and I had no explanation. I had just played very well. And so I went to the airport, and I don't condone anyone doing this, but this was probably like it was 11 o'clock in the morning. It was 11 o'clock in the morning now, and I'm at the airport, and I'm about to break down, right? And so I'm sitting at the airport bar, and I have a beer in front of me, and I call my dad, and I'm like, Dad, I'm getting sent home, and I'm like, I'm in public. I'm on the verge of just like crashing. Like I'm gonna bawl. Like I'm gonna be in tears right now in public, and it's the last thing I want. He goes, well, what are you doing? And I said, I'm at the airport bar and I have a beer in front of me. He goes, great, finish it. And so I take about a half a beer now, and I finish the beer, and he goes, great, order another one, and I'm gonna talk you through this. And so my dad and I were in a conversation for like 30 minutes, and it just was one of those like. And I still broke down, by the way, but just quietly. It wasn't like a big scene. But it was one of the hardest things. And I will tell you, even now, that is one of the biggest adversities. And I would love to see how that would have played out if I didn't get sent home, or if I did this differently, and if I had the mindset to get back from this. But that broke me. It still does. Like I still get like choked up about it right now, like talking about it. That broke me as a player. Unfortunately, 3 games later, back with my club team, I do my knee. Get a call from Pat Noonan, who was the assistant coach at the time, after doing that, and he said, "Hey, was it? It's the last 10. There's like 30 seconds left in the game in New York." And they thought, hey, he was just calling. He's like, "Hey, is your knee all right?" Like, it's the last 30 seconds. I figured you just kind of like fell off, and went to the locker room and everything was okay. And he goes, "If you're okay, we want to invite you to the next camp." Well, I was out 13 weeks. So that next camp was to go play with an actual qualifying game, World Cup qualifying game in Trinidad and Tobago, where they lost. In my mindset, it was like I was going to help them win. Because I wasn't there, they didn't have the extra mindset. Because the whole thing with that year with the national team is they thought they had this older mindset that everything was just going to come to them. And I was the guy who was going to run around and make it happen. That was my mindset, right? I was going to be the extra, the electricity to get it into them of like, hey, let's just follow that. That's cool energy. We'll go up on, up in that. But yeah, that was the lowest part of my career.
And how, staying with that. And first of all, thank you so much for sharing that. No, I'm saying this honestly, like, it's humbling, and it's an honor for us to hear this, and it's public now, but for you to trust us with that and to share that, and for folks who've played, they get that, right? And even if you haven't played, forget about that. Let's not be so, myopic with that. For anyone who's done anything in their life that they've devoted a significant amount of time to, and now you're on the cusp of this huge breakthrough, and you're at the highest level, right? For a male player in this country, getting invited to the men's national team is an honor. Right. And to be there and to have that experience, and then to like, I can't even, I can imagine it, haven't experienced that, but I can imagine that. So thank you so much for sharing that. How did you then overcome that, or begin to overcome that, if at all? I mean, you said it broke you, but like you still played, you still produced, you still hopefully found joy in the game. What was that process like?
The next few years were tough for me. So 18, I got back the last game of 2017. Ended up I played the last 10 minutes of the last game of the season. Ended up scoring a goal, a very emotional goal for me. And then we were pretty terrible at the end of the season, so we didn't make playoffs. And 2018, we get a new coach in Brad Friedel. It's funny. I always say this is funny because a goalie coaching, you wouldn't think that he was all about fitness, but it's all he was. He was fitness. And I'm sitting here like, didn't you like navigate playing? Isn't that what you wanted? Him and I didn't we talk about like the professional level and coaching and switching from coach to coach because he doesn't like me and this and that. That was one of the times where I think it was a positive for me was leaving the Revolution because Brad Friedel and I, who had a job for another a year and a half after I left, him and I we didn't see eye to eye in the way we played, in the way I played, in the way I was going to fit his system. And at that time, and this could, I guess, be youth players as well, but not as much. I had played 7 years with the same guys. A lot of times that's a positive, but sometimes it's like, all right, where's the next? I'm getting too comfortable. Where's the next step? How do I keep pushing myself when I already know every player's tendencies and training just becomes a little bit minute and just kind of you're going through the motions almost. And so I needed a new challenge, and I needed a new challenge, one, mentally, but two, away from the organization of the Revolution, but also the coach. So I needed a change. Peter Vermees was a good change for about 2 months, but he pushed me in a different way, right? And I learned a lot from him as well. I learned more tactics from him than I did anyone else. I learned structure and fitting into a system, and I learned how to be a tougher guy. One of the reasons that I left Kansas City or was traded from Kansas City is he said I wasn't tough enough, and he wanted people to fight, and I took that to heart. And then when I went back to New England, I fought everyone and everything. I was the hardest worker. And when we went to the bubble and we played against some teams, I remember Peter Vermees coming up to me and saying, "Why didn't you do that in Kansas City?" And I said, "You lit the fire underneath me. And then you didn't give me a chance to do it. You told me when I was on my way out." But he didn't give me a chance to prove it. And when I did, he was like, "Wow, I'm like, well done." We had a good conversation. It was like, "Hey, you did what you wanted to do, and I'm sorry that I didn't give you the chance." But the piece where I got over it was actually coming back here. So I played. It's funny, in New England in 2020, Bruce Arena was the coach, and so we had actually almost the exact same falling out. Through COVID, I played every game. Next 5 games I played, and then all of a sudden I got dropped and didn't play much again. And so it was one of those, and him and I had the conversation. He's like, "Hey, I heard you have a chance to go back to Seattle. It sounds like you need that mentally, and I'd never stay in your way if you want to go home." And I said, "I do want to go home. It's going to be less money." And he goes, "I'm sorry to hear that, but I think it'd be a positive for you, and I think you need it to get back to your old self." And I said, I agree with you. Come back to Seattle, and I played something like 53, 55 games in a row because I just needed that lift, mentally, physically, everything. I just needed a lift of someone telling me I'm going to be okay.
And you played those games predominantly at left back, if I'm not mistaken, right? Or was
the first year, so that would be 2021. I played as a 6 next to João Paulo, a 6'8".
Nice.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was a 6'8".
Yeah.
I was a winger. Every once in a while, I played right back if Alex was out. But
Yeah. Was that the years of? Is that the CONCACAF Champions League?
I was 22. So the CONCACAF Champions League was my last game of my streak of playing every game. I was injured actually playing in that game, but they gave me, because we had played on a Wednesday and we had a following game in Dallas on a Saturday, and they didn't travel me. They're like, "Get better. We already did it. We won the championship. Go get better." So that was my first game I missed with Seattle since being there. Yeah, I had pride in that run too.
Yeah,
I was playing
as you
through some
should.
injuries, and I need to keep this. Play me 10 minutes. I don't care. Yeah, I will run
As
through
you
this.
should. It's actually one of my favorite photos of in terms of Seattle soccer history. There's some amazing photos, but that's a special moment, and the look on all your guys' faces is priceless. So, yeah,
My first and only trophy.
What a trophy, my man!
Yeah,
That's not bad.
What a trophy!
Not bad at all.
yeah.
And Kelyn, if I can ask too, just when you talk about the mental side of coming back home, how was that for you to come back? You're obviously playing for the Sounders, right? For your hometown team. You're around your family, you're around your friends. People get to come watch you play. You can wake up in the morning, you can go, obviously to training, but then afterwards, you get to see your family, you get to see your friends. What did that mean for you after going through all the struggles you went through in the previous years?
It was funny. Obviously, so my sister had two kids when I was in New England, and then a third one when I was back here. And so it was kind of just to see that. You talk about like being around your family off the field. It was incredible, and that was the biggest thing for me. Is even when things are going bad on the field, I had my family off. I had my friends. I had people around me that I knew and trusted and can rely on, which I had in other places too. Don't get me wrong, but nothing beats family for me. Nothing beats your friends that you grew up with and really grinded with and continued to keep in your circle. And so that helped a lot. I remember my first three months here, my parents were up at my place like twice a week because they missed having me around. And so I was like, hey guys, I'm an adult now. We got to like pump the brakes a little bit. I'll be around for a long time now. Like we're going to be okay. You don't have to get all of it in now. But it also gave me, and this is something that I think we don't think about enough, is athletes need goals to reach. If you don't have a goal to reach, why are you doing it, right? You're just going through the motions, like I had said earlier. And so because I was at home, because I was in front of my family, my friends, the kids that I coached back when I was in high school, the club coaches that coached me, people that now look up to me because they're from Federal Way and they want to get, somewhere else. It added pressure, but it gave me a goal. It gave me a reason. Right, I had a reason why I wanted to push, a reason why I wanted to play better, a reason why I wanted to go through injury and continue to play because it's everything I love because all these people had their eyes on me now differently than before. Like it was almost like I was coming home and had to prove to myself, to them, to everything that I was still a great player, but also that I was still a good role model. So it added that extra mentality of like, it gave me my reason why.
Yeah, the purpose. I love that. That's so applicable on so many levels. Coaches go through that as well.
Oh yeah.
I speak, coaches need to constantly feel a sense of purpose. So
like affirmation and purpose is something that everyone needs as a person, right? It's we talk about it in relationships where it's you have to give a wife or a significant other a more, hey, you look beautiful, you're doing great, these are that sort. Everyone needs it, and when you learn that about yourself and you understand where you need it and when you need it, it's great as a player and it's great as a person. It really is.
So listen, at the risk of, we might have to. I know you're local, and I know you'll be starting a job here soon.
Yeah.
But listen, the invitation is always open. We're gonna have to have you back if you'd love to come back, because we could go on talking for hours, right? That being said, I do want to, as we start to wind down, there's a couple things I want you to share that you and I have talked about, and I think it was so rich, and I want to record it for our young players. I've written 3 things down, and at the end, at the very end, we're not closing yet. How are you on time, by the way? Are you good?
A little more. Come on.
Okay.
Ask your question.
So I wrote down 3 things that you've said that have really stuck with me that we can share with young players about your journey and anyone. But one was respect for others, right? And respect for just the different levels. 2 was constantly refining yourself as a player, right? You mentioned how you were constantly in this process of learning new things, redefining yourself. And then 3, you said it recently about needing goals to reach, right? And goal setting, always reaching for something, always striving for something. So I love those 3. And later I want to ask you if you want to, what 3 things you want to leave young players with, if they're the same as those or if they're different. But what I wanted you to touch upon is we had a conversation recently about as a player, seeing the game through other people's eyes and improving yourself by learning how other people like to play. And Mumbi and I touched upon that in previous episodes. And I just want you to, give your take on that and provide any examples for young players, because this is beautiful.
Yeah, and look, Mumbi and I actually talked about it before you got on here with your technical difficulties.
Wonderful.
Well, we had this conversation in person. It's something that every player, I think we've lost it a little bit because we've gone a little bit more on the individual side rather than the team side. And I think there could be a combination of the both to make players better, coaches better, teams better, and actually create a better experience for the fans as well. and it is understanding players. We talked about the respect piece of it. How do I get my players in the best positions for them, but also the best positions for us? Like, coaches used to say this to us if when we're going through like recruiting processes as kids. If these coaches are here and the team is playing well, everyone looks good. If one person's playing well, yeah, they might look good, but your team's not. So you're not helping them in any way. It's better if everyone looks good than it is if just yourself looks good. And so for me, it was always finding the soccer savviness a little bit, understanding the game, having respect for my players to know that I know that Lee Win needs to get on the ball. Nico Ladero was another example for the Seattleites that are listening to this. So Nico Ladero, Leo Chu, even Jordan Morris or João Paulo, right? They wanted to touch the ball. If they didn't touch the ball, they'd run out of position to go get it. And so if, as a left back at that time, and I was talking to Mumbi about this, I got the ball a lot because we played in that three-back system. We built out of a three-back system, and the ball kept coming through me because they knew I would get the ball off my feet and find ways, and I was a midfielder playing in the back. Defensively, cover me. Attacking, get the ball to my feet, right? And so my first look was Leo Chu, because if Leo Chu's not getting the ball, he's not going to run. So I get in the ball real quick, I get it back. Okay, he's happy. Next one, Nico Ladero. Great. If I get Nico the ball, he's going to stay in the side that I need him, and they can play 1-2s with each other, Leo and Nico, and that's fine. Or Nico stays in the spot that I need him. Otherwise, he's going to run to the other side of the field, and I'm left alone, and I have no options. Same with Albert and Joao. If I get them the ball, they're going to stay happier, more in tune. When we talked about this, you have to stay in tune, because if you're not getting the ball but you're making the runs, why would I make the run again? And so you have to reward players for their efforts, but also understand what they want. Jordan Morris doesn't really want it to his feet, but if he makes a run, you better try and find him, because he's going to make 3 or 4 of those. And if he doesn't get it on the third or fourth, he's not going to make the fifth. Guys like Leo Chu, same way. He's not going to run if you don't give him the ball. So I got him the ball. And the times when we played together, we won because of that. Another player that was really good at it was Freddie Montero. He'd find a way to have that soccer savviness of, okay, I'm near the box. We're not really creating much right now. Okay, we have Nico on the field, we have Raul on the field, and Albert and myself. So if I can draw a foul anywhere around where I actually get the ball and I've got 3 or 4 players around me, we're going to find a chance to score, or we can find a way to slow down the game. Boom, he's on it. He takes a step in front, and there's a foul on top of the box. It happens so many times where you just got to have that awareness, that savviness of your players, of the game, of the time, of just being around it.
That's great.
It's funny, as we talk about it, I guess, off as well, but I had chatted with Joe Dale, so Joey Dale and Luke Hammond yesterday, right after the video session. I kind of showed them what the thing's about. And I told him, and I go, Luke, I need you to have your positioning, because he didn't really understand his positioning. He's usually a left back, and so he's kind of going higher. And I said, if you could just be here, where you need to know that if you take a touch with your left, you have the ability to play your winger, okay, play your center mid, and play your other center mid. The defender is going to come straight at you. So if you're too far wide, the winger ball is straight on. That's a horrible ball, right? You want it at an angle. So that's your positioning. And then I told him his first look needs to be Richie. Because if Richie gets the ball, we talked to Mumia talked about this after as well. If Richie gets the ball 4 or 5 times and a half, he'll dribble 1 or 2, but the other times he'll play easy. If he only gets it 1 or 2 times, he's dribbling.
Right.
And so for us as a team, we need him to get the ball more, but also be more comfortable on the ball to knowing he's going to get it again. Because if he knows he's not going to get it again, he's going to do everything he can to just make something happen. And that's not what the team needs.
Yeah, I love this. And for any young player, what you're hearing is corroboration of how this game is about people, of course, right? It's kind of obvious to say. But again, it's a different paradigm than maybe what we're constantly exposed to, which is, technique and your first touch and your physical strength and all that. Yeah, okay, all that stuff matters and, whatever. But you're hearing from a former pro, former national team player that, hey, at some level, the game boils down to how well do you know the people you're playing with and how well can you set them up for success, right? And it's not even just a superficial, oh, I'm going to keep them happy. It's about aligning their qualities with the team intentions, right? And if you can be that type of player, then you can get better. Because I think what's interesting, and I have to highlight this, Kelyn, you're a guy who, as a young player, and I remember watching you even in your early days as a pro, and some of those teams that you played on, right? But you're a player who likes to go at people, right? You're a winger, dribbler, like you like to attack and score. So I say that just to say, we're not asking everybody to be like a Sergio Busquets of like, I'm going to get it and just play 5-10 yard passes. No, the point is whatever your strengths are, you still have to understand the strengths of others. On the last episode, Mumbi and I, we spoke about the example of Thierry Henry. Thierry Henry was always a guy who was one of the most, you could say, one of the biggest presence, one of the biggest personalities, one of the biggest talents on any team he played. But even he, when he was at Arsenal, had to learn, okay, I've got to change the way I run so that guys can find me and so I can serve the team. If young players are listening to this, it can be a tough thing depending on your environment. I understand, but you have to try to get to places and be around people who help you see the game and process the game through other people's eyes, as Kelyn is mentioning. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's beautiful.
Kelyn, on that note, just direct follow up. Is there a player, because obviously we're talking about you and your process, but is there a player you played with or played against that you had an experience where like, oh, that guy really, really gets it? Like, who in your mind, are there one or two players you can think of that like, oh, wow, no, that guy is incredible at that type of association with others? Is there anybody you can think of in your mind?
Yeah, it would be a guy named Chris Tierney. He was actually a left back for New England for a long time, and he was the kind of the guy that put me under his shoulder. He was an older guy from New England, so he had friends there, and he immersed me into New England, and so I kind of just followed the way that he worked. And again, he was a role player. He wasn't this extravagant player who's going to be on a bunch of money and going to be the guy, but he was always on the field. He captained us for a long time. And then another one would be a guy like Shawry Joseph, who also did that. And he knew his players, right? He knew he was the best player on the field.
Shawry was
most of the
amazing.
time.
Shawry was amazing.
He played a ball to the right foot. He played a ball into space for a guy named Kevin Alston, who was faster than hell. But on his feet, it was half and half, right? Chris Tierney knew that if he had Teal Bunbury on his side, Teal didn't want the ball at his feet. He's going to check and go. And Chris would play it around the corner and Teal would be in. Like, we would talk about the game every once in a while because he's like, why would you play that there? I crossed the ball into Lee Win with two center backs in there. And he goes, why would you play that? When is Lee ever going to win that ball? If you played it on the ground to his feet, sure, but you're whipping a ball in to guys who are 6'5" and Lee is 5'8" and never has won a header in his life. So what are you doing? And so those things that you start to think like, oh, I was in trouble, and so I played across rather than actually turning around and keeping the ball. That does make sense. Okay, that's probably not a best place to play someone. But those little things, I get it from most players nowadays. You see it sometimes of, hey, if it's not on, you can actually turn around and keep the ball. You don't have to cross it, actually. Weird. There's a whole field you can play in. But Chris Tierney and Shawry Joseph were those two guys that started that thought process for me. And as I played, I got to know more guys, and that extended it more and more. But as you play, it's almost like it clicked for me afterwards. Once I started that thought process, it was always like I was then the guy telling others, why would you do that when you have this here? So
now you're
cool.
becoming a leader.
Yeah. Exactly. And it didn't take long, because once you change that mindset, you're thinking like, oh, it's like almost like glass shatters and you can see a full picture now.
Mm-hmm. But part of that too is you have to be open to that, right? Yeah. So for Chris or for Shawry, you have to be willing to listen. You have to be willing to maybe ask them questions and be vulnerable, because you don't know all the answers, right? Like maybe Chris or Shawry have been around in that team for 3, 4, 5 years. Shawry, I think at one point, one of the best players in the MLS, mm-hmm. right? And so if you come in and you're like, nah, I already know all the answers. Okay, well, great, Kelyn. Like, you're not going to learn from me then, right? Mm-hmm. That might be Shawry or Chris. And so, right, like, that's part of it. You have to remove your ego a little bit and be willing to look stupid or foolish at times, just so that you can take in information. Yeah? Would you say so?
I would. And look, as a player, especially a young one, we talk about respect, right? These guys were older than me. They were playing for a long period of time. Shawree is, at that time, in my opinion, was the top three, top five in the MLS players. And he was towards the end of his career, before he came to Seattle, but he was still one of the best players to play in the MLS at that time, and still overall, I think, is. Um, and look, my upbringing was, you're a rookie, put your head down and work, like have your fun and do your work and dribble and have a good time. But I was always a yes sir kind of guy in that sense. I have respect for these older guys who have kind of paved the way. I'm going to sponge it up, listen to them as much as I can, and then work as much as I can for them, because that's just how I was raised. But also, yeah, like you said, there's a little bit of that. You have to drop your ego, drop your guard a little bit, and then allow that to come in, and then have that respect to follow up on it. You can listen to it all you want, but if you don't actually internalize it and actually create that mindset in your mind, it's almost useless.
So, a couple questions for you to finish off. I want you to say something about to the younger players out there who are undersized, because that was a big part of your journey, and this is something that a lot of kids face, which is and of course, and increasingly when you do have some coaches or some environments that reward, like the pure physicality, or when winning matters, and it's usually the big, strong, fast kids that win. What advice would you give to players who are undersized in terms of just their development and what they can do to continue to feel like they're getting somewhere?
Well, there's a few things, right? So one, you can always work harder. Like there's nothing you can do. Work harder. But my dad used to tell me this when everyone was going through, and I was obviously 4'0" or 5'0", and everyone was starting to go up in their puberty levels and their height and their strength and everything I wasn't yet when I was growing up. Instead of going through the wall, find a way around it, right? Instead of I'm not saying shy away from tackles, don't go up for headers, those things. But if you're going one-on-one with someone, hey, you can find another way. If some bigger guy is backing into me, okay, let him back in, and then boom, I'm around him because I swung around him because he doesn't think I'm that strong. Use your brain more than your physicality. And it almost, you have to as a smaller guy, because I can't keep up with the physicality sometimes. You just have to find other ways to get around that obstacle. And that is something you have to almost play games with. There are times where I won headers, even at the professional level, with guys who are 6'4", 6'5", just because I was clever enough to time my jump correctly, to nudge them when I need to. I even stepped on a few feet on accident to make sure that they couldn't jump. Like, you just have to get them off their game to make sure that you can have a chance to win that header, to win that tackle. Like, there are so many different ways to be creative and find a way.
I love that. Mumbi, would you add anything?
No, it was spot on. Love that. It's a little bit more game insight for players, that you got to be more of that's just it. Be more of a gamer, right? Yeah. There's more than one way to solve a problem, right? And the problem is, you're in front of me. I want to beat you. And I'm not going to do it your way. So, for example, you're a smaller player. So, yeah, like you said, you got to find another way. Yeah, you got to be a little bit creative.
So we could, seriously, we could be here talking for a long time, but
Kelyn's got a game to get ready for.
Yeah, so folks won't. This recording will be out at the time of this recording. For those of you who don't know, Kelyn's gonna roll back the years tonight and suit up for Ballard FC in our Open Cup match, and we're super excited for it. I can't wait. Can't wait to watch him. Obviously, we'll have one of the best seats in the house. Privileged. But when this comes out, we'll blast it out. Kelyn, hopefully you share it with everybody in your network, and we would love again to have you on again. But for the people, just the last word goes to you, my man. And my only ask would be, maybe if you have 3 things that you want to leave the young player with. But other than that, you get the last word.
Great. I'm not sure if we chat about this or not, but since I was I told that story about when I was 10 years old, I wanted to go, UCLA and then pro. My dad gave me these 3 things before every game that I played in, and he tells it to me now. I spoke to him this morning on the phone, and he told me these 3 things. And I used to get texts when I was in Boston or when I was away, even with the national team, before every game, like clockwork. And there were times when my dad and I's texts were that every single time. It's me saying thank you, him sending the text, me saying thank you, him sending the text. It's just the way that, it worked at that time. But there are 3 things. We've kind of chatted about them as we've gone through here, but it's number 1, have fun. You have to have fun. If you don't enjoy this game, why are you doing it? This needs to be an enjoyment. And if the enjoyment leaves, hopefully you find your way back to it. But have fun. That could be in a game. It could be in a practice. It could be just watching it. Have fun. The next piece is be creative. And it could go with a winger who just wants to go dribble and have fun and try a new move. Great, try it. If it doesn't work, try it again. If it doesn't work, find a way that it's going to work and then be creative enough to try it again. It's a smaller guy trying to find a way, be creative around winning a ball in front of a bigger guy, stronger guy, faster guy. Use your brain, be creative. And then the last one, and I think this one, especially as you get older and as you lose the love of the game, not as creative or just don't want to be there, you have to work harder than everyone else. If you and I are going up against each other and I work harder than you, even if you're more talented, I have a chance now because I'm working. And that could be on my own, working harder against myself. It could be against a teammate. It could be in practice. It could be in a game. Have fun, be creative. Don't let anyone work harder than you.
Well, you heard it, folks. Straight from Kelyn Rowe. Fantastic player, fantastic person, and someone I'm thankful to call a friend. Thank you so much for joining us on the Impact Space podcast. Mumbi, thanks for another great show, and we'll see you all next time.